Well, we begin off with our usual prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Gunatu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we had a series, of course, which was the Ramayana, the story of Rama, which was nicely concluded. And so once previously or twice previously, we did something from the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavata Purana is a significant text, a vast array of information, stories, combinations, which are all inspiring. Some philosophy is in there as well. I suppose before we start, we have to give you what is the scriptural structure in the Vedanta and why we would refer to this book. So, at the risk of boring you to death with information you already know, I will tell you what we regard as scripture and what is scripture in any event. Well, scripture from our standpoint is a record of some personal experience. Somebody says, I have seen God, or I have seen the truth, or I have experienced the existence of the soul firsthand, and also claims that by giving you a sufficient formula, you can also discover this. Since one person discovered it, there's an assumption all of us can do it. We all have the potential capacity to discover the glory of our own self. And if it wasn't like that, then we would find no purpose in our life, because the central purpose as seen by Vedanta in our life would be the realization of our inherent own freedom. We already have it. It is just a question of uncovering the freedom that we already have. Removing the obstacles will be the technique. We call this technique yoga, that indicates not only the ultimate sense of union that we have in a positive sense, but also it indicates the process, which is an integrating process, a uniting process. And the more we integrate, the more we find less difference between the various components that we familiarly experience and become our environment. The body, for example, can be regarded as an individual thing with its own physiological and anatomical understanding. That's one thing. But we can't really separate it from our thinking process. If you're dull and depressed, in a bad mood, then we know it has its effect on our physiology. And people who've studied this will make a very clear connection. For example, the great author Louise Hayes will specifically identify certain emotional states of mind with certain physiological conditions. Now, whether or not that's absolutely true, we know that generally it's the case. We can't avoid it. So our thought shapes every single cell of the body, because what is the difference? Mind and matter, the separation that Descartes made, is it true? Not really. It's just that there's a difference in the degree of subtlety. Mind is more subtle than the material body, but really they are the same thing. If you fast for a number of days, and this was tried out in the Chandogya Upanishad, then you'll find that memory decreases, mental functions decrease, as well as the body. The body vitality decreases. And what we call prana, energy, At its most subtle is psychic prana, or otherwise called thought. So this is our purpose. And all texts will be, scriptural texts anyway, will be there to indicate a kind of set of principles that when we employ it, some higher values, then we'll realize for ourselves the truth of the scripture. In other words, we'll have a personal verification of it. So we take the standard, scriptural standard that we have as the Vedas. Veda, from the root vid, to know, to see. When you say the word video, you're really deriving it from the same mother of all Indo-European languages, Sanskrit. And so the Vedas is our standard. But what do we mean by the Vedas? Is it a set of scripture, books? Is it paper? When was it bound? When was it written? In what ink was it written? Well, according to us, no. According to us, these are no doubt found in text, these truths, but they are really discoveries of what already is existing. These are not invented things. So these are not texts of inspiration, these are texts of expiration, expired as it were, by the fundamental source of truth, which is pure being itself. Now, there are two sections to these Vedas. There's what we call a karma kanda, which is to do with rituals, also to do with the material science and so on, cosmology, etc., and hymns of praises and all the rest of it. Very fine. But then there is the philosophical portion, the jnana kanda, knowledge portion. This we take as our fundamental scripture. Why do we take it like this? Because they are purported to be the discoveries, the inner discoveries of great sages or rishis, literally seers of the truth. And so therefore they're claiming we have seen. And so any scripture, whether it is Christian scripture, Jewish scripture, whether it is Muslim scripture or Baha'i scripture, any scripture will have to have an example of first-hand direct experience and attainment. Secondly, a kind of handbook, a manual. Please do A, B, C, D, up to Z. Giving us a toolbox where we can experiment with all these recommendations, implement them, and the direct proof will be our direct perception. We can verify, yes, it's true, or it's not. It's up to us. This would be the scientific approach that is connected with scripture. Now, if we have that base, then all others can be compared to it. And this base we call shruti, the thing that is perennial, the thing that is heard. Something is heard, and that's because all of these were systematically repeated in certain metrical organized ways, so that they can be repeated thousands of years later with appropriate hand gestures, rhythms, pauses. And so there is a dialectic part of this, which is necessary. And so we take all this linguistic rules and regulations, grammar and so on and so forth, and we know that what is heard is reliable. On the other hand, what is remembered is entirely unreliable. We call this smrti. So any other text after this is called smrti. And the Puranas is an example of smrti, what is the thing that is remembered. And therefore, we have to check it against the Shruti for its verification. And what we put under Shruti really as our standard is the Bhagavad Gita, because it is a synthesis of the Upanishads themselves, and the systematic way of organizing it and removing any doubts. That is a commentary on that in a sutra literature, a sutra form called Brahma Sutras or Vedanta Sutras. So if we take any scripture, supposing you have a scripture that is invented today or written down today from a leader who says, I have a revelation, I want to tell it, his followers carefully write the words down. If they correspond completely to these three measures of truth, we say it is true. invariably there will be what we understand as a mixture of sugar and salt, or sugar and sand. We want the sugar, we want the sweet thing, but all the sand we don't necessarily want. So if you have in a so-called scripture a series of explanations of genealogies, so-and-so begat so-and-so, and so on and so forth, it's not really relevant to our central purpose in life. In other words, it is contained within a body of work which we call scripture, but that sand portion we can put aside. If you want to choose sand, all you'll do is make an abrasive effect on your teeth. Nobody wants it. So this is our measure of truth, and that means that Hindu scriptures are organized in a certain way. So we have the Shruti, let's call it the Upanishads or the Vedas. And then from there we have historical epic accounts. There are two of these comparable to the Greek Iliad and Odyssey. And this is called the Mahabharata, probably about 5,000 years old, and the Ramayana, which we've studied now for probably over a year. And so that is probably maybe about 7,000 years old. It's a nucleus of historical events embellished over time with sub-stories and structures and certain elements of mythologies or allegories available for dramatic expression in song, in dance, in drama, and in poetry. So it's a wonderful thing. The Bhagavad Gita is extracted from this Mahabharata, and all of these texts will have this compatible component with our philosophy. But what does it mean by philosophy? It's not in the sense of intellectual gymnastics. It's nothing to do with headiness. It provides us with an element of rationale, no doubt. But we have to understand that experience is something that is different from the intellect. You cannot get this truth through the intellect. The scriptures themselves tell it. Not through scholarliness, not through reading, not through intellectualism, none of these, not through the superficial standard way of establishing knowledge, none of these. But seer of truth, that's what you have to become. Now, there's another section to do with this, because these Upanishads are very abstract, and they were only taught to select few people because of this. And recognizing this, mainly because of Shankaracharya's work in making his commentaries and other schools of thought making their commentaries, the Bhagavad Gita became really the key scripture because it became a beautiful, simpler version of the Upanishads. And in 18 short chapters, fairly short chapters, it's probably one of the shortest scriptures ever. And within this, we can easily pick up all the profound and abstract principles that are contained in the Vedanta philosophy. Vedanta, end of the Vedas, finality of the Vedas. And so this is another class really of scriptures. We take this Bhagavad Gita really as the easiest way of teaching the principles of the Upanishads themselves, makes it more widely available to the wider general public. But some people also find this difficult because it is a poem, the longest philosophical poem in the world, and requires commentaries. And so we have the various commentaries also from various schools of thought, providing us with a dualistic way of looking at it, a qualified non-dualistic way of looking at it, an absolute non-dualistic way of looking at it. And of course, in between as well. So your interpretation can be different, no doubt. But you see all these different approaches on close examination will be seen to be offering us a supplementary position all the time. And then there are these classes called Puranas because we may not even understand what is being taught in the simple phraseology and profound teachings within the celestial song, otherwise called Bhagavad Gita. What will you do? So we'll have to give people a story form. We'll have to give people a mythology that has a profound meaning. And when we trace the elements of these mythology, we'll find their roots contained in the Vedas themselves. And so one of the most profound parts of these Puranas will be this Bhagavatam, which is part of the Vishnu Purana, really, or that school of thought. It's a Vaishnavite text. But whatever we know, for example, about Krishna, is contained there largely. And these stories bring alive some of the more ancient references that we contained in the Vedas, in the Rig Veda in particular. Now, the story that we're going to deal with today is to do with Dadhichi. Dadhichi is a sage in the ancient philosophy that we have, and is best known for his supreme sacrifice in these texts, these Puranas, because he has decided to make the supreme sacrifice. And so much did he inspire Sister Nivedita that she uses the symbol contained within the stories, namely two thunderbolts interconnected like a cross, and put it on the first version, really, that we have of the Indian national flag. Of course, it wasn't used, but she was the first person to have the idea of an identity that can be put on a flag representing India's independence and independent spirit, and saw it as a symbol called a Vajra of the great, great sacrifice that we are all capable of making, and we can hold up as a supreme ideal. Just as in Christianity, we can say that the highest ideal will be the cross. A person prepared to say, I will give up my entire life for the good of humanity. And the greatest and highest teachers will do this. So he's best known for his sacrifice, and he gives up his whole life so that his bones could be used to manufacture a celestial weapon called a Vajra, like a thunderbolt, the diamond-like celestial thunderbolt, which is really of the deity of Indra. Indra, of course, in the Vedic times was the chief of the deities. And typically in all of the mythology, in all the stories we will see, particularly we find it in the Vedic text as well, that Indra is continuously in conflict with Vritra. Vritra is his nemesis. Now, there's an interesting book called Vedic Physics. And in Vedic physics, he points out that karma kanda portion of the Vedas, the ritualistic portion, is also to do with physics and cosmology. And that Indra and Vritra, this continuous battle of forces, or even if you extend it to the Devas and the Asuras, two forces continuously fighting each other. This, of course, comes out in Zoroastrianism and comes out eventually in Christianity as angels or forces of good and angels or forces of darkness, because the Jewish people were taken into Babylonian exile, and there they came across the Persian ideas, in which Zoroastrianism played an important function, and their outlook on life was something akin to what is popular now as a symbol, the symbol of Taoism, where we have this yin-yang, this integrated pairs of opposites, without which we don't really get a universe. And so Indra and Vritra, two antagonistic forces, one wanting its freedom to fly away, and the other to restrict it, to hold it down. So a force between electricity and gravity, if you want to put it in physics terminology. Now in this Bhagavata Purana, this this particular type of scripture, we have this Dadhichi described as the son of the sage Atharvan and his wife Chitti. And Atharvan is said to be the author of the fourth Veda, the Atharva Veda. And Chitti was the daughter of the sage Kardama. And the names of Dadhichi's wife and son, Suvarchas and Pipalada, and we know a lot about Pipalada because Pipalada was a sage and philosopher in the tradition, best known for being attributed as the author of the Prashna Upanishad. And the Prashna Upanishad is among the 10 Mukhya Upanishads, primary Upanishads. And he's believed to have been the founder of a certain philosophical school of thought, which he taught in the Atharva Veda. So, after the death of Dadhichi, when Survachas was about to ascend the funeral pyre, she heard an Asharini Vani, a celestial voice, that told her that she was pregnant. And Survachas removes the fetus from her womb with a stone and places it near a banyan tree, proceeding to end her life. And her child, Pipalada, becomes the famous rishi associated with the Pipalada school of thought and is best known for being attributed with, as I mentioned, the Prashna Upanishad. The Prashna Upanishad is an Upanishad like all the Upanishads in a sense, of inquiry. It's to do with asking and answering questions. This is a wonderful characteristic of the Oriental way of thinking, that there are no doctrines or dogmas propounded, and there is no belief in a person or individual necessarily, or a belief in general. It is all about seeking and inquiring. So, teachers there and question and answer sessions go on, and they may well be recorded and come out as Upanishads. Now, in terms of scripture, just to conclude this idea, you see, we take our Gospel of Ramakrishna as also a scripture because these are the words of somebody who was at the least realized. We take him more than that, but never mind, it's not about the personality. We absolutely kill a universal message by emphasizing a personality, because then it becomes a personality cult. And then, of course, we become exclusivist and we become gnosists. What do I mean by gnosists? Well, gnosism says, my nose is the only true nose, your nose is false. On what basis, you said? On the basis that is my nose is better. My watch alone tells the correct time, all other watches are false. So, Dadhichi is often featured in many of the legends and stories. He's sometimes portrayed as having a horse's head. And so why does he have a horse's head? Well, there's a legend associated with that. And according to the Rig Veda, when Dadhichi resided in Devaloka, that is, that place reserved for the administrators of the universe. So we call this Devaloka. He observed that the earth was populated by numerous ashuras. So we have to understand the gods, if you want to put it that way, I don't like the term because it's not accurate, and the demons, but we'll put it in this terminology for the time being. Anyway, he urges Indra to destroy the ashuras, and towards this endeavor, he offers him a head of a horse, which he had found in a lake in the country of Sharanya. And he using the bones taken from the horse's head, the two of them destroy a number of the ashuras. Now there's a variation to the story. It's featured in the Jaiminya Brahmana. The Devas are said to have refused to bestow the Ashvashira mantra of the Vedas to the Ashwin twins. The Ashwin twins, these are they're known as the Ashwin twins or Ashwini Kumaras. These are twin deities associated with medicine, health, the dawn, the sciences. And in the Rig Veda, they are described as youthful divine twin horse people, traveling in a chariot drawn by horses that are never tired, and they're really portrayed as guardians. So we have to have a glossary of terms when we read these stories to understand what these things mean. Anyway, they declared that the being who would divulge the secret to the twins would have their head burst into 1,000 pieces. And the twin doctors of medicine, they look out, they seek counsel from this great sage Dadhichi, who offers to divulge this mantra. But he only asks that the Ashwins replace his head with one of a horse when he reaped the consequences of the curse. He'll take the curse on himself. And after teaching them the mantra, of course the sage's head burst, and the twins carried out his request, and hence restored his life. And it's stories like this that give us the supreme example of self-sacrifice, inspiring Sister Nivedita to say, it is through this supreme example of renunciation and self-sacrifice that we attain the highest in life. In Swami Vivekananda's words, he who lives for others lives. The rest are more dead than alive. So let us start with this story that is contained in the Bhagavatam version. Now, like all stories, I suppose we have to begin with a once upon a time scenario. So once upon a time, in the heavenly region, Indra, the king of the deities, was sitting on his throne with his wife Shachdevi. He was then quite puffed up with pride. Now you'll notice that in the Vedas, Indra is the chief, one of the chief deities, certainly the head of all the deities. And we have to understand what we mean. That's why the English translation, Deval, as gods, is not really appropriate and leads to an accusation of polytheism, which is not really there. And so we can see that Indra falls from grace and is replaced by Vishnu, a relatively minor deity in the Vedas. And why is that? Because Indra represents that form of human pride. And Indra is the king of the Indriyas, the senses. So all the revealing factors within the body, eyes, ears, and so on, all the senses, are also devas. What is the supreme chief of all these devas? It would be the mind itself. And so we can understand that all of us from time to time have our ego puffed up. There's a wonderful saying I often use, I'm humble and proud of it. So when you're proud, you require attention, you require praise. Oh, Swami, what a beautiful talk you gave. Oh, so proud. Chest puffs out. I stride around. Oh, Swami, I couldn't understand a word you were saying. You talked a load of nonsense. I'm going to listen to another Swami who's much better speaker, and there are many of them. And so he deflated. And it doesn't take much in human nature to deflate the ego and drive one to suicide. Anyway, at that time, Brihaspati is the guru of the deities. What arrangement we have in our spiritual life here, in our daily life here also, is replicated in the Devaloka, the realm of the deities. And so he's the guru of the deities. And the guru, of course, of Indra himself. He enters the assembly, but Indra, because of his pride, because of his achievements in his wars against the Asuras, then Indra doesn't even get up to welcome him or offer him a seat. In fact, he shows him no respect whatsoever. And as you know, in the Indian tradition, the respect for the Guru is there in the Guru Stotram of Shankaracharya, that there is no merit ever that you can ever get without the grace of the Guru. Now, Brihaspati understood, of course, because of his insight, because of the teacher, that Indra's ego had become swollen with pride. And he immediately leaves the heavenly realm. And Indra quickly realizes his mistake. Once he sees him go, and he starts looking for his teacher. He starts looking for him to apologize and to make amends. But though the search parties were sent everywhere, no one could find Brihaspati. You see, it's a common practice that when you have pride and you realize that you have offended somebody, perhaps, or not paid the due respect, it's immediately followed by guilt, self-blaming. Now, the Asuras are the eternal enemies, as we said, of the deities. They take this opportunity to invade the heavenly realm because everybody's looking for Brihaspati. And so they're caught by surprise. And so they take advantage of this and they attack with full force and they defeat all the deities. And they severely, all the deities in the heavenly realm are severely wounded by the Asuras. And so the deities, they run to Brahma. Now, who is Brahma? Brahma is the cosmic creator. And his cosmic mind. Cosmic mind is the only creator we have in the Hindu philosophy. And so this cosmic mind grants any gift possible. And Brahma tells him, well, actually, you failed to show proper respect to such a holy person as Brihaspati, so it's your fault. And for this reason, because of this sin, you were defeated by the Asuras, even though they're actually weaker than you because they live immoral lives. What is the definition of immorality? Weakness. Our fundamental source of immorality is our ignorance. And from there gives rise to our egoism, our sense of pride, and all the other things. And what is ignorance? It is weakness. That is why the key value in our spiritual life is the cultivation of strength. Now he says, go to Vishwarupa, the son of Tvashta, and please him with your respect and service. And though he's young, he's the only one who can help you. And so accordingly, these devas appeal to Vishwarupa to help them. Now you see, Vishwa, the dwelling, the form who has a dwelling place. In other words, the whole of space. And so he agrees, and by the power of his sacrifices, austerities, and meditation, he takes away the Asura's power. In this way, of course, our own austerities, our own meditations, our own prayers take away the powers of our ignorance and our weakness. Anyway, all of these powers get restored back to Indra, and Indra then easily defeats these Asuras and drives them out of heaven. And Vishwarupa continues his sacrifices for the devas. But his mother actually was an Asura, a demon. So he also had some affection for the demons, some kind of sympathy. My ancestry is somewhere there as well. And so whenever he performed any sacrifice for the devas, he secretly also gave some of the offerings to the Asuras also. Even if we have a small desire for some reward from good works, or even from our own spiritual practice, it goes to the unconscious mind where the seat of desires and therefore perpetuation of miseries occurs. And when Indra found out about this secret boost to the Asuras, he became absolutely furious. He became an Asura himself and chops off Vishwarupa's head. And of course, Vishwarupa's father, Tvashta, is grief-stricken and he vows to take revenge. So he begins a sacrifice to bring about Indra's death. And soon from the sacrificial fire, a dreadful-looking being emerges named Vritrashra. This is the origin of Indra's nemesis. And at Trashta's orders, Vritrashra turned on the Vedas themselves, on the Devas themselves. The Devas hurled all their weapons at the demon, but he immediately swallows them, and he swallows them all. And along with the weapons, he also takes away all the Devas' powers. We can be swallowed by all these things in the mind. And the Devas realized that they were in trouble. And they begin praying to Lord Vishnu. That is the Lord that pervades everywhere. And of course, that aspect of divinity that the Bhagavatam Purana is dedicated to. So how do you worship? How do you appeal to that? You appeal by praying and singing the praises. And at last, of course, from our human point of view, pleased with their hymns, the Lord appears before them and tells them, I understand everything. There is only one way for you to overcome Vritrashra. If Vishwakarma, that is the divine architect or builder, if you like, forges a Vajra, a certain thunderbolt for you. But this Vajra must be made from the bones of a Rishi who has lived a perfectly pure and holy life and whose body is strengthened by austerities. Go to the Rishi, the Dadhichi, who is the knower of Brahman, the highest supreme principle, and pray to him for his bones. And so the Devas go to Dadhichi and make their request. And Dadhichi, in order to test them, answers their request by saying, well, look, to give you my bones means to invite death for me. And who wants to die? Nobody wants to die. So he would not agree, actually, to the Devas' request. But then the Devas said, but for great souls like you, who are full of compassion, full of holiness and love for everyone, and who always strive to do good for others, what is there that they cannot give away? That's why we've come to you. And so Dadhichi gives them this reply. Well, I was testing your knowledge. I was testing you. I wanted to hear about the right path from you, what we call dharma. No doubt the body is dear to everyone. But one day this body must die. And this is something we all have to tell ourselves. At one point, the body is going to die. It will be good fortune if it can be for the service of others. Sometimes you ask swamis and so on, why did you become a swami? And they will say, well, to serve others. And knowing that we have so many lives, we may as well sacrifice one of them for you. So I'm here for your benefit. I shall leave this body today. Then Dadhichi went into deep, deep meditation. And in this meditation, he unites himself with the Supreme Brahman, for this is the object of all our meditation. And he leaves his body on the earth. Vishwakarma then made the Vajra from Dadhichi's bone, uniting, gives it, uniting all the devas who then have the capacity to attack the ashras. Now let us deal with a little bit of spiritual philosophy. If we dedicate ourselves to others, we're not afraid of death. We willingly sacrifice the life so that the bones can be made into this Vajra for the good of others. And what will be the result? The result will be not only for the good of the whole of humanity, but it will also be for the good of ourselves. And so we defeat all the ashras, the mental aberrations of weakness within ourselves. Anyway, the battle that ensued was great, it was terrible, and it was held on the banks of the river Narmada. And they armed with this Vajra made from Dadhichi's bones, the Devas seemed invincible, and the Asuras scattered in terror all over the place. And seeing his army fleeing from the Devas, Dhritarashtra roared out, "O Indra, you killed my dear brother Vishwarupa. It is right that today you shall be punished. And it's my good luck that you stand before me so that I may kill you myself to avenge my brother's death. But in case you're thinking of destroying me with the Vajra made from Dadhichi's bones, that would actually be a gift to me, a gift for me. Your divine weapon is strengthened. How? With the austerities of that great sage and filled with the power of the Lord. You have been sent by the Lord Vishnu himself. And wherever the Lord is, victory also prevails. And if I should die today, my worldly bonds shall be cut by Sri Hari's grace, and I shall attain to his lotus feet. And so the battle then began in earnest. Don't forget, a devotee doesn't want this state of the Supreme realized. It wants the sweetness of the company of the Divine Lord, to live in the afterlife always with their divine ideal, in this case with Vishnu. And so, wherever the Lord is, victory prevails. And if I die today, it will be such a blessing because I shall attain to the lotus feet of the Lord of the universe, Lord Vishnu. And so the battle then begins in earnest, and Dhritarashtra flings his deadly trident at Indra, but Indra cuts it with his Vajra and then cut off one of Vritra's arms. And Vritra then strikes Indra on the cheek with his mace, and the Vajra slips from his grasp and falls to the ground. And all the Devas gasp to see this. But Vritra says, "O Indra, pick up your Vajra and fight. Victory and defeat, happiness and misery, and life and death are to me all alike, because I know we are all just instruments of the Lord. What is nature is composed of these three ingredients. We know them as gunas, the binding forces of sattva, rajas, and tamas. They all belong to nature. The Atman is just their witness. So, as in all stories, what is the message? Our battle is like a game of dice. And if we register it as a battle, then it's a misunderstanding of what is going on. So it may look like a battle and may look like a struggle, but it's really like a game of dice. No one knows who will win, no one knows who will lose. And these words come out from the Asura, and it's surprising to hear. And Indra replies, "Dhritarashtra, you must have attained perfection through your worship of God." You can see the similarity of Ravana having had the privilege of falling and dying at the hands of Rama. But you must have attained perfection through your worship of the Supreme Principle, because otherwise, how could you speak such words of wisdom? How wonderful that you have taken refuge at the feet of Lord Hari. We often find in devotional literature this phrase, taking refuge at the feet of the Lord. And so, the Supreme Friend is there with us, of all beings and the inner self of all. And Indra continues, "You have certainly transcended the world-bewitching Maya." This Maya of the Lord himself. You see the phrase, you think that forces are against you, but this is the game of life being played by the Lord himself. It's not an antagonistic thing against you. It's the Lord playing with himself, with his own plot, with his own drama, with himself. This is called the world bewitching Maya. And you have attained limitless bliss as a result of your deep devotion to the Lord. And so the battle then resumed, and after retrieving the Vajra, Indra cuts off Vitrasha's other arm. And then the armless Ashura opens his huge fanged jaws, which were as wide as the sky, and rushes at Indra, swallowing him as well as his elephant, because that's his vehicle, Airavata, and swallowing all of that whole. But as Indra was protected by the power of Vishnu, he didn't perish. He quickly cut himself out of the belly of the Asha and then cut off Vritra's head with the divine Vajra. And so it all came to an end, the great battle came to an end, and all who were present saw a bright effulgence. This is how it ends. The light of the immortal self emerged from Vritra's slain body and ascend to the supreme abode of Vishnu. This is the Purana's version of living happily ever after, ending up on a highly positive note, a note that shows the struggle that we have, psychological struggle that we have, and ultimately the victory due to faith and due to devotion, love, and a sense that all will be well since we're taking refuge at the divine feet of the Lord of the universe. And nothing is therefore impossible. If we were to have some kind of vision statement for our Vedanta center here, it would be, in my understanding, infinite possibilities. Infinite possibilities are with us, but it requires a shift in attitude where we see that this is a game and the whole of mythology is there stated in symbolic terminology, sufficient for us to understand the principles in a simple way. Now, this is very typical of the old stories in the Puranas. It is typical, really, of the mythology that is contained, the Eastern mythology, of good versus evil, if you like, of dark and light and so on. It's always the same kind of theme, all dressed up in different terms. That's not the point here. Well, it's one of the points, but the main thing is, look at the self-sacrificing attitude of the sage Dadhichi. That became the example and the inspiration for Sister Nivedita to have these two Vajras, thunderbolts, interlocked with each other. And she registered this has come from the story of Dadhichi, which no doubt she would have taught her children to their great delight. So this is one of the stories of the Bhagavatam, part of the treasure that we find there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.